The Acolyte could have been entirely different if they focused on Qimir as the main protagonist of the story. Episode 7 of The Acolyte has been a massive controversy in the community for the past days. That episode was filled with large amounts of weird creative decisions, and also, what was up with that end credit music? I mean, that's not Star Wars. I mean, that's so inappropriate for Star Wars to use that kind of music on the end credits. I don't get it. I don't understand how that was approved, but somehow it was, and okay, it's done. We gotta live with it. But besides from the really weird decision of adding that song into Star Wars, the rest of the episode definitely suffered from the obvious weird writing style, and this series overall is just heavily being beaten down by a story that's not really supporting itself, because they are jumping and trying to fill so many different corners that they're not able to create something coherent, something that keeps consistent throughout the entire season. So episode 7 was just incredibly weird, and honestly, in my opinion, some of the worst Star Wars that I've seen in live action medium in a long time, or just Star Wars storytelling in general. But that's just my opinion, and if you have a different opinion and you like episode 7, then all respect to you. I will not attack you for that. But what I really wanted to talk about in today's video was how the Acolyte could have been entirely different if they focused on Qimir as the main protagonist of the story. As you probably well know by now, the Acolyte was advertised as a dark side-led story. And because of that, a lot of the expectations that we had of the Acolyte was that the series would primarily focus on the dark side elements of Star Wars to ensure that the dark side is the overall element of this entire series. I really think that having Qimir as the main protagonist in Star Wars The Acolyte would have been the absolute best option for this series, as he is honestly the most intriguing character so far in Star Wars Acolyte. At least that's what I think, and that's because he is actually delivering on the promise of a dark side led story in this series. I really don't think that the story that we got with Osha and May, or May and Osha, around the whole dark side stuff that they're going through right now have been any good at all, really. It's just a lot of jumping back and forth, and there's no coherency and consistency in their story. And from what we've seen that they have done so far, none of it is anywhere near as dark and twisted as what we saw in episode 5 when Qimir took the stage and really projected the dark side of the Force. I'm even willing to say that May haven't really been a dark side character at all. Yeah, she's killed some people, but a lot of people are getting killed in Star Wars, but that doesn't mean that whoever kills another person is all of a sudden part of the dark side. And Osha is kind of just middling with the Force right now in dark side realm because she's being tempted by Qimir, but that's basically it. That's all we get from the dark side aspects of those two characters, it seems. And the whole story of Soul kind of being bounced back between the moral dilemmas of light and dark, which we have seen in a few episodes right now. I think it's interesting, I like it, but again, it doesn't really deliver on the dark side aspects as well as the series might think it does, because we really need something more similar to what Qimir did in episode 5 in order to sell the idea that this story or this series is a dark side led story. So let's put on the table a hypothetical version of Star Wars The Acolyte where Qimir is the protagonist. I think we have two main alternatives here. Number one is that he could be a character named Venomous, which we read about in the Darth Plagueis novel. And by the way, I made a whole video about that last week, so if you want to see it, make sure to check it out. But he could be Venomous, and from that he could be the Acolyte of Tenebrous or potentially Plagueis if they make the decision to manipulate the timeline a little bit or something. The other alternative, which I'm more in favor of, is that he will be Venomous, or he could be a completely different character, but that he is on a mission to go and fight or bring down Tenebrous and Darth Plagueis, because in his mind, he is the stronger and better Sith, and so in his mission to take them down, he needs an Acolyte. And that's where 𝐒𝐔𝐁 or May comes into the picture, and from there, we can kind of take a little bit from what's going on already in the story and make it so that Qimir will try and convince May or 𝐒𝐔𝐁, or even both of them in a weird twisted way, to become his apprentice or his Acolyte, and then him and his apprentice can now go and fight Tenebrous and Plagueis in order to try and take the throne as the next Dark Lords of the Sith, and then start a whole new generation in the lineage of the Rule of Two. Obviously, knowing how the story goes forward in the Star Wars franchise, and also how we know Tenebrous and Darth Plagueis are incredibly powerful, I don't really think that Qimir would survive against a fight with them in any stretch of the imagination, but it'd be really cool to see nonetheless, and it would also give us an introduction to these characters, Tenebrous and Plagueis, and then in Season 2 of The Acolyte, they can continue this story forward. And then we cover the whole part where Tenebrous is killed by Darth Plagueis, and Darth Plagueis meets young Palpatine, and then we see the whole part where they infiltrate the Republic and so on and so forth. I'm not entirely sure what you guys think, but at least to me, I think this second alternative sounds really, really interesting, and it's something that I think Acolyte should have been. The protagonist of The Acolyte should have been Qimir, and you might wonder, well, he's a bad guy, why should we root for a bad guy? But then, to be fair, in Star Wars we have many examples where we root for bad guys. Thrawn, Darth Vader, some even Palpatine. Or in another universe outside of Star Wars, we could look at people like Thomas Shelby. People root for characters, whether or not they are good or evil, if they're able to resonate with the characters one way or another. And that's obviously done through great story writing. There are many examples in cinematic history where people have been favoring the bad guys, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I think as long as Qimir is written well, and then we see him go through various forms of moral dilemmas and issues with other characters that do project the light side of the Force, like 𝐒𝐔𝐁, May, Soul, and the other Jedi, they could return. I'm not saying that they need to be removed from the story at all. In fact, I'm saying they could just as easily be implemented into this story where Qimir is the protagonist, but all of their actions will be there in order to support Qimir's story, and he will have to fight them and they will have to fight him while he is trying to get an Acolyte. And through all of this kind of struggle, there's a lot of room to make Qimir not just a dark side exclusive character, like where he's completely zoned out of everything light side, but where he's struggling a little bit back and forth, but ultimately he is true to the dark side of the Force because he has one mission, and that is to defeat Tenebrous and Plagueis. So yeah, I think this would have been a better version for the Acolyte compared to what we have today. I think the Acolyte that we have today is honestly really bad. It's not fun. Like, okay, it's a little bit fun to watch it, you know, just to casually watch it, but it's like whenever I read the Darth Plagueis book, I think, wow, this is a great story. Like, I feel like I'm really immersed into the universe, and then when I watch The Acolyte, all I'm able to see is just bad writing and weird creative choices and listen to pop music. So it's so silly. It's so silly. I don't get it. Anyways, Qimir is so far the best thing that has happened to the Acolyte, and I really hope in the next episode that we see his aggression once more, and that it ends at the very least in a very dark moment for Star Wars and the characters and all these things, so that we can have some form of conclusion that's supported by the dark side of the Force and not the light side of the Force or any other things. So yeah, But do let me know in the comment section below what you thought of this little alternative story for the Acolyte. Do you like it or do you not like it? And with that, never forget, the Force is always with you.